a revelation that will shake everything you know about fallen angels. For the first time in history, we discover the hidden truth about Sariel, the only angel who achieved the impossible, divine forgiveness after the fall. This isn't just another angelic story. It's heaven's best-kept secret, changing your perception of redemption, forgiveness, and second chances. For centuries, sacred texts have spoken of fallen angels as beings damned forever, with no possibility of return. But Sariel's story challenges this belief. Her name, which means God's command, reflects not only her former position, but also her unique destiny as the only being who managed to return from the deepest darkness. Ancient manuscripts discovered in lost monasteries in Tibet and the Caucasus Mountains reveal a truth that religious authorities have kept hidden for millennia. These texts, written in languages that only the most specialized scholars can decipher, tell the most extraordinary story of redemption ever documented. Prepare for a journey that will reveal how God's command became a symbol of hope for all fallen beings. What you are about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about divine justice and heavenly mercy. This is the story that will change your understanding of forgiveness forever. Before time began, when the heavens shone with pure glory and the stars were still dreams in the divine mind, Sariel occupied one of the highest thrones in the celestial hierarchy. His name, meaning God's command, was no coincidence. He was the supreme general of the angelic armies, the divine strategist whose military wisdom was legendary even among the most powerful archangels. Sariel's magnificence transcended any earthly description. Her stature was imposing, towering above other angels like a tower of pure light. Her face, sculpted with divine perfection, radiated an authority that could make the most powerful demons tremble while simultaneously comforting the most anguished souls. Her eyes, a blue as deep as the cosmic ocean, held the accumulated wisdom of eons of heavenly service. But it was his wings that truly defined his glory. 6 majestic wings, each the size of an earthly cathedral, extended from his angelic back. The upper feathers glowed a celestial gold that hypnotically reflected the divine light. The immaculate white middle wings seemed to be made of the same substance as the clouds of paradise, and the lower wings, a shimmering silver, contained inscriptions in the celestial language detailing each of his military victories. For immeasurable millennia, Sariel had been the Almighty's right-hand man in military matters. His palace in the third heaven was a fortress of crystal and light, where the strategies that maintained cosmic order were planned. From there, he commanded legions of warrior angels, each specializing in different aspects of celestial warfare. His personal army, known as the Commandos of Light, was composed of 10,000 elite angels. Each had been personally trained by Sariel in the arts of spiritual warfare. These angels were not simply soldiers, they were extensions of Sariel's will, capable of executing military maneuvers that defied the laws of physics and logic. Sariel's victories were legendary. When the forces of primordial chaos threatened to devour the newly formed creation, it was Sariel who organized the celestial resistance. During the Great Rebellion of the Star Titans, her military strategy was so brilliant that victory was achieved without spilling a single drop of celestial blood. Angelic chroniclers wrote that Sariel could read the battlefield as if it were an open book, anticipating enemy movements with an accuracy that bordered on prophecy. His loyalty to the Almighty was unwavering, a devotion that had been tested in 1,000 cosmic battles. The angels admired him not only for his power, but for his integrity. The seraphim respected him for his wisdom. The cherubim revered him for his justice. And God himself trusted him without reservation, delegating to Sariel decisions that affected the fate of entire galaxies. But in Sariel's heart, hidden even from her own conscience, grew something no angel had ever experienced before: compassion for imperfect creatures. While other angels observed humanity with the distance appropriate for celestial beings, Sariel felt an inexplicable connection with these fragile mortal beings who inhabited the small blue planet Earth. His first visits to Earth were routine, observation missions mandated by the Celestial High Council, but each visit left a deeper mark on his angelic soul. He watched as humans struggled with mortality, how they clung to hope even in the darkest moments, how they loved with an intensity that no angel in their perfection could fully comprehend. During one of her observation missions, Sariel witnessed a scene that would change her destiny forever. In a small, war-torn village, she saw a human mother weep over the body of her son, a young soldier who had died defending his home. The mother's tears weren't simply salt water. They were the physical manifestation of a pain so deep it transcended dimensions. At that moment, something broke in the powerful archangel's heart. For the first time in his eternal existence, Sariel felt what humans call emotional pain. That mother's suffering became his own, and that empathic connection would be the seed of his eventual downfall. Why must they suffer so much? Sariel wondered, as the mother's tears seemed to pierce her angelic soul like fiery arrows. Why does the Almighty allow such pain when he could stop it with a simple thought? This seemingly innocent question began to consume his thoughts. During his celestial rounds, during the high council meetings, during his morning prayers, the image of that grieving mother remained etched in his angelic memory, and with each passing day, the question grew more insistent, more disturbing. Sariel began to study the human condition with an intensity that troubled her angelic companions. She spent hours observing earthly suffering, documenting every injustice, every pain, every tear shed. Her heavenly library filled with records of human suffering, and with each page she wrote, her heart moved further away from the divine perspective and closer to the human experience. The transformation in Sariel was subtle but profound. His military orders, once executed with heavenly precision, now carried a tinge of hesitation. When ordered to punish corrupt civilizations, Sariel found excuses to delay execution. When he had to deploy his armies to implement divine justice, he sought alternatives that would minimize human suffering. His fellow archangels began to notice these changes. Michael, the archangel of war, expressed his concern during a meeting of the High Council. Gabriel, the divine messenger, reported on the irregularities in Sariel's behavior. But no one, not even the wisest among the seraphim, could imagine the extent of the great heavenly general's transformation. The final crisis came when Sariel received an order he would have carried out without question in earlier times, but which now represented everything he had come to abhor about the divine justice system. It would be this order that would lead him to make the most momentous decision of his eternal existence. The order that would seal Sariel's fate arrived on a tablet of heavenly fire, as was customary for missions of the utmost importance. The message was clear and direct. Execute divine judgment on the city of Kadesh, a human metropolis that had fallen into such profound corruption that it threatened to contaminate the entire surrounding region. But Sariel had spent weeks observing Kadesh from the celestial dimensions. Yes, there was corruption in the highest echelons of power. Yes, there was injustice and evil in the palaces and temples. But she had also seen something the other angels had missed. Thousands of innocent people living in the slums, families struggling day to day to survive, children playing in the streets, unaware of the corruption that surrounded them. The divine command was specific: heavenly fire that would consume the entire city, no exceptions. It was the kind of absolute justice Sariel had executed hundreds of times before, but now, with her heart transformed by compassion, the command seemed an atrocity. For 3 days and 3 nights, Sariel wrestled with his conscience in his crystal palace. His wings, normally spread proudly, folded around his body as if seeking to protect him from the storm raging within. He did not eat the heavenly manna. He did not drink from the river of life. He did not participate in the angelic choirs. He simply sat on his throne of command, gazing at the fiery tablet containing the divine command. On the 3rd day, he made a decision that would change the history of the cosmos. Sariel, the commander of God, the supreme commander of the heavenly armies, the angel who had never questioned a divine order, chose to disobey. But his disobedience wasn't passive. He didn't simply ignore the order. In an act of compassion that defied the entire celestial structure, Sariel descended to earth in human form and began warning the innocent people of Kadesh about the impending destruction. For hours, he ran through the city streets, his angelic form disguised as that of a wandering prophet. He went from house to house, from family to family, urging them to flee. "Judgment is coming," he told them, "but you do not deserve to perish for the sins of others. Flee now. Take only the essentials. Go to the northern mountains where you will be safe." Some listened to him, especially especially the mothers who saw the sincerity in his eyes. Others ignored him, thinking he was just another religious lunatic. But Sariel persisted, knowing that every life saved would be worth any punishment he might face. When heavenly fire finally descended upon Kadesh, the city burned as commanded. But thousands of innocent people had already escaped, guided by Sariel's warnings. From the northern mountains, they watched as their city burned, unaware that an archangel had risked his eternal existence to save them. The silence that followed in the heavens was deafening. For the first time in celestial history, an archangel of such high rank had directly disobeyed the Almighty. The angels whispered in the golden corridors, unable to comprehend how someone so devoted, so loyal, so perfect could have fallen so dramatically. The call to heavenly judgment resonated throughout the divine dimensions. Sariel was summoned to appear before the throne of the Most High, not as the victorious general he had been for millennia, but as an accused man facing charges of rebellion. The trial was swift and devastating. There was no defense possible. Sariel did not deny his actions. He did not seek excuses. He did not ask for mercy. With the dignity that had characterized him throughout his life, he accepted full responsibility for his disobedience. "Why did you do it?" the divine voice echoed throughout the cosmos, a question that held not only authority, but also profound sadness. Sariel's response was simple but devastating. "Because I could not allow the innocent to perish for the sins of others, because the love I feel for your creatures is stronger than my obedience to your commands." Those words sealed his fate. Sariel was stripped of his position as supreme general, of his 6 glorious wings, of his crystal palace, of his place on the High Council. His titles were erased from the heavenly records, his military victories officially forgotten, his name removed from angelic hymns. But the most painful thing wasn't the loss of power or prestige. It was the separation from the divine presence. The moment he was cast out of the heavens, Sariel felt as if his soul had been torn into 1,000 pieces. The connection he had maintained with the Almighty for eons was abruptly severed, leaving him with an emptiness no celestial being had ever experienced before. The physical fall was brutal and symbolic. Sariel fell for 7 days and 7 nights, traversing dimensions of pain and darkness that no being had ever experienced before. Her angelic body, accustomed to heavenly perfection, convulsed with each dimension she traversed. Her once magnificent wings blackened and were torn during the fall. Her perfect face was marked with lines of suffering that would remain forever. When he finally crashed into the reality of the lower dimensions, Sariel was no longer the glorious archangel he had been. He had become something new, something that didn't exist in the celestial classifications, a fallen angel who maintained his love for humanity. Unlike other fallen angels who found solace in active rebellion or revenge against their creator, Sariel sank into deep regret. While Lucifer built his kingdom in the depths of hell and other fallen angels wreaked chaos and destruction on earth, Sariel wandered alone among the shadowy dimensions, bearing the weight of his choice. During the first centuries of her exile, Sariel experienced something no angel had ever known before: celestial depression. She spent entire days motionless in dimensional caves, reminiscing about her lost glory. She could hear the distant echoes of the angelic choirs she used to lead, could feel the absence of the divine presence like a wound that would never heal. His new companions, the other fallen angels, sought him out to join their ranks. Lucifer himself sent emissaries to him, offering him high positions in his infernal hierarchy. But Sariel rejected all offers. He had not fallen out of pride or a desire for power. He had fallen out of love, and that love still burned within his transformed heart. What do you think about what you've seen so far? Do you understand why Sariel made such a drastic decision? Do you think she did the right thing by disobeying to save the innocent? Let us know in the comments your perspective on this moral dilemma that challenged even the heavens. But Sariel's story didn't end in despair and isolation. After centuries of pain and regret, something extraordinary began to happen. As other fallen angels drifted further and further from the divine light, sinking into cycles of revenge and destruction, Sariel began to do something radically different: serve in silence. The transformation wasn't sudden. It began with small acts of kindness kindness that Sariel performed almost unconsciously. When she saw a lost traveler in the desert, she would subtly move the sand dunes to reveal a hidden oasis. When a plague threatened a village, she would secretly divert the winds to disperse the disease. These acts weren't calculated or sought after for recognition. They simply flowed from a heart that, despite its fall, remained filled with love for humanity. Ancient texts discovered in lost monasteries in Tibet and the Caucasus Mountains reveal extraordinary details about Sariel's secret interventions. These manuscripts, written by mystics who had developed the ability to perceive angelic activities, document a series of events that changed the course of human history. The first great act of documented redemption occurred during the Great Plague that devastated the Nile Valley more than 3,000 years ago. Records describe how a deadly disease threatened to wipe out the entire population of the region. The best doctors of the time had declared the condition incurable, and authorities were preparing for the total collapse of civilization. It was then that Sariel, working from the dimensional shadows, began a medical intervention that defied all natural laws. Using the remnants of her angelic power, she diverted the disease to uninhabited regions of the desert, where the deadly bacteria disintegrated under the intense solar radiation. At the same time, she imbued the region's water sources with microscopic healing properties, creating a natural medicine that strengthened the immune systems of the survivors. He did this without seeking recognition, without expecting reward, without even allowing the beneficiaries to know his identity, simply out of genuine love for the creatures he had defended during their fall. But every act of kindness caused him physical pain, because a fallen angel was not designed to perform acts of pure kindness. His transformed nature fought against his benevolent actions, creating an internal suffering that would have destroyed any lesser being. During the construction of Noah's Ark, the texts reveal an even more extraordinary intervention. Sariel, who during his time as a heavenly general had catalogued and known all earthly creatures, became the invisible shepherd of the great animal migration. While Noah built the ark, following divine instructions, Sariel worked secretly to ensure the animals arrived at the precise moment. The manuscripts describe how Sariel traveled to the farthest reaches of the earth, guiding species that would have been impossible to find or transport by natural means. She directed large mammals from the frozen tundras, exotic creatures from the tropical rainforests, and marine species that needed to be preserved in special compartments. Her encyclopedic knowledge of animal creation, combined with her love of life, made it possible for Earth's diversity to survive the flood. In ancient Egypt, during the time of Israelite slavery, Sariel orchestrated one of his most complex interventions. Texts reveal that while Moses received divine instructions to free his people, Sariel worked in the shadows to weaken Egyptian defenses. Each plague Moses invoked had been secretly prepared by Sariel, who knew the weaknesses of each earthly kingdom due to his heavenly military experience. But his most notable intervention occurred during the crossing of the Red Sea. The manuscripts describe how Sariel, using his knowledge of ocean currents and gravitational forces, created a natural phenomenon that allowed the Israelites safe passage while simultaneously ensuring the destruction of the pursuing Egyptian army. It was an act of military precision that rivaled his finest celestial strategies, but executed in the service of human liberation. During the Crusades, Sariel developed a unique form of intervention. Rather than favoring one side over the other, he dedicated himself to protecting the innocent caught in the conflict. Texts describe how he appeared on the battlefields, invisible to the combatants but guiding civilians to safety. He secretly healed the wounded on both sides, regardless of their religion or affiliation. His goal was not to determine the outcome of wars, but to minimize human suffering. But the most extraordinary thing about all her actions was the price she paid for them. Every act of kindness caused Sariel intense physical pain. Her nature as a fallen angel rebelled against these pure actions, creating an internal friction that manifested as constant suffering. Her tattered wings bled light every time she saved a life. Her face was etched with new lines of pain every time she comforted a broken heart. Yet Sariel persisted. Her love for humanity had grown during her exile, fueled by every act of kindness she performed. She had discovered that suffering, far from diminishing her capacity for love, love had amplified it. Every tear she shed was not just one of personal pain, but one of deep empathy for the suffering of others. Sariel's tears, shed over centuries of silent service, began to create something unique in the cosmos. Ancient texts describe how these tears, imbued with genuine repentance and sacrificial love, did not simply fall to the ground like ordinary water. Instead, each drop contained the purified essence of her transformed soul. These tears began to rise toward the heavens, defying the natural laws that normally prevented anything from a fallen angel from reaching the heavenly realm. Each drop carried with it not only her repentance, but also the testimony of every life she had saved, every act of kindness she had performed, every moment of suffering she had willingly endured out of love. Celestial chroniclers noted this extraordinary phenomenon. For the first time in the history of the cosmos, the essence of a fallen angel was ascending toward the divine throne. Sariel's tears formed an invisible celestial river, a liquid testament to transformation that defied all theological precedent. Thank you for staying with us this far. Your attention and dedication are extraordinary, and we promise you that the best of this incredible story is yet to come. Sariel's redemption will reach levels that will defy everything you thought possible about divine mercy and second chances. The moment that would change celestial history forever came after 3,000 earthly years of silent service. Sariel's tears, accumulated over millennia of repentance and sacrifice, had formed something that had never before existed in the cosmos, a river of pure redemption flowing from the lowest dimensions to the highest. This celestial river, completely invisible to mortal eyes, but resplendent like star liquid to divine beings, had begun to surround the throne of the Almighty. Every drop contained not only Sariel's repentance, but also the full testimony of her transformation. Every life saved, every act of kindness performed in secret, every moment of suffering voluntarily endured out of love. The archangels Michael and Gabriel were the first to notice this extraordinary phenomenon. During their regular celestial rounds, they observed streams of liquid light ascending from the lower dimensions, something that defied all known cosmic laws. Nothing from a fallen angel had ever managed to penetrate the celestial barriers, and yet here was this river of redemption flowing directly into the heart of heaven. Raphael, the archangel of healing, was the one who finally identified the source of this extraordinary river. Using his ability to trace spiritual essences, he followed the stream to its source and discovered something that completely astonished him. The tears were coming from Sariel, the fallen angel who had disappeared from heavenly consciousness for millennia. The discovery caused an unprecedented commotion in the heavens. The 24 heavenly elders met in emergency session. The seraphim suspended their eternal chants to deliberate on this unique event. Ezekiel's wheels, which had been constantly turning to maintain cosmic order, stopped for the first time in history to observe this phenomenon. The celestial high council, composed of the most powerful archangels and the wisest celestial beings, faced a situation for which there was no precedent. Never before had a fallen angel shown signs of genuine redemption. The angelic fall had always been considered definitive, irreversible, a transformation that permanently separated the fallen from divine grace. But Sariel's tears contained something that defied all established theological concepts. Each drop was a living testimony of genuine transformation. The heavenly chroniclers, using spiritual measuring instruments that could analyze the purity of the soul, confirmed that these tears contained no traces of pride, revenge, or rebellion. Instead, they were imbued with humility, sacrificial love, and a repentance so profound that they resonated on frequencies only divine purity could reach. The debate in the High Council lasted 7 heavenly days. Michael argued that divine law was clear. The fallen angels had chosen their destiny and must face the eternal consequences. Gabriel, however, pointed out that Sariel's tears demonstrated something new, a transformation that had not been contemplated in the original celestial codes. Raphael insisted that his nature as a healer allowed him to recognize when a spiritual wound had genuinely healed. It was Uriel, the archangel of divine wisdom, who finally proposed the solution. He suggested that Sariel be summoned for a special trial, something that had never occurred in heavenly history. It would not be a trial of condemnation like the one she had suffered suffered during her fall, but a trial of evaluation to determine whether the transformation her tears suggested was genuine and complete. The summons resonated throughout the cosmos. For the first time in 3,000 years, Sariel was called to appear before the divine presence. The message reached him while he was comforting a mother who had lost her son in a war, a scene that immediately transported him back to the origins of his fall. Sariel's journey to the heavens was completely different from his original fall. Instead of being swept away by divine force, he ascended willingly, carried by the same tears he had shed for millennia. His appearance had changed dramatically during his exile. He was no longer the glorious general he had once been, but he was also no longer the dark and vengeful angel many had expected. His face, marked by millennia of voluntary suffering, reflected a profound wisdom that can only be born from pain, transformed into love. His wings, though no longer golden, held a different luminosity, a light that seemed to spring not from heavenly perfection, but from the purity earned through sacrifice. His posture was no longer that of a military commander, but that of a humble servant who had learned that true strength lies in compassion. The heavenly judgment that followed was unique in the history of the cosmos. For the first time, a fallen angel had achieved something seemingly impossible, touching the divine heart with his genuine transformation. The heavenly court met in the most sacred judgment hall, a dimensional space where divine justice and mercy were in perfect balance. The witnesses were extraordinary. Every human soul Sariel had secretly saved was invited to testify. The spirits of the children they had evacuated from Kadesh, now residents of paradise, spoke about the mysterious prophet who had saved their lives. Survivors of the plagues Sariel had averted testified to inexplicable healings. The animals he had guided to Noah's Ark, now inhabitants of the heavenly garden, testified to the goodness of the being who had protected them. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. The mother whose tears had been the catalyst for Sariel's downfall, the woman who had wept over her son's body in the war-torn village, appeared before the heavenly tribunal. Her soul, purified by centuries in paradise, shone with a serene light. "Lord of the universe," she said, her voice ringing like crystal bells, "I never knew an angel had witnessed my pain. I never knew my tears had touched a heavenly heart, but now I understand that my suffering was not in vain. It served to awaken the purest compassion in this being who now stands before you. If my pain could transform an angel, then every tear I shed has eternal significance." The silence that followed these words was so profound that it seemed to hold the entire weight of the cosmos. The archangels, accustomed to divine majesty, had never witnessed a moment of such emotional intensity in the heavens. It was then that the voice of the Almighty resounded, not with the authority that had condemned Sariel millennia before, but with a tenderness that made the pillars of heaven tremble. "Sariel, my son, you left my presence out of love for my creatures. You disobeyed my orders because your heart was filled with compassion. During your exile, you served in silence. You suffered willingly. You transformed your pain into love. You have proven that redemption is not only possible, but that it is the purest expression of my divine nature." The divine words continued, each one healing wounds that had remained open for millennia. "Your fall was not a failure. It was an evolution. Your disobedience was not rebellion. It was love. Your exile was not punishment. It was preparation. You have learned what no perfect angel could teach, that true holiness is born from suffering transformed into service." Sariel's restoration did not simply mean his return to his former position. The angel who had fallen as supreme general returned as something entirely new, the archangel of redemption, the first celestial being specialized in transforming suffering into love. His new position in the celestial hierarchy was unique. He didn't command armies as he had before, but rather led something far more powerful, the ministry of second chances. This celestial department, created specifically for him, handled cases other angels considered impossible, lost souls in need of redemption, beings who had fallen so deeply they seemed unredeemed, situations where only someone who had experienced the fall could understand the way back. Her new wings weren't golden like the originals, but instead shone with a pearly light, a luminosity that reflected not untouched perfection, but the purity won through suffering. Each feather held the story of a life saved, of an act of kindness performed in secret, of a moment of pain transformed into compassion. Her heavenly palace, rebuilt in the fifth heaven, became a refuge for all souls seeking redemption. Unlike other angelic palaces built with crystal and pure gold, Sariel's was made of a unique material, crystallized tears of genuine repentance, creating walls that radiated hope and second chances. The first case assigned to him was the most challenging possible, working with other fallen angels who, unlike him, had remained in darkness. Lucifer himself, from his throne in the depths of hell, watched with a mixture of awe and fury as his former companion had accomplished what he considered impossible. "How is this possible?" roared the Prince of Darkness during an assembly of demons. "How could Sariel achieve forgiveness when we have been damned forever?" The answer came from one of his wisest lieutenants. "Because he never stopped loving. We fell out of pride and revenge. He fell out of compassion. We used our exile to sow destruction. He used it to serve. We fueled our pain with resentment. He transformed his pain into love." Sariel's redemption not only transformed the structure of heaven, but also had a profound impact on humanity. Her story became the supreme example that it is never too late to change, that even the deepest falls can be the prelude to even greater heights. Mystics and prophets from all religious traditions began receiving visions of Sariel. Unlike other angels who appeared in heavenly glory, Sariel manifested humility, displaying the scars of his fall as badges of honor, demonstrating that true holiness comes not from untouched perfection, but from the transformation of suffering. In the monasteries of Tibet, monks began to include Sariel's story in their meditations on compassion. In the churches of the Christian world, theologians began to reconsider the nature of divine forgiveness. In mosques, Islamic scholars found in Sariel an example of Allah's infinite mercy. In synagogues, rabbis saw in her story confirmation that teshuvah, repentance, can transform even the deepest falls. Sariel's influence extended beyond religious circles. Her story began to inspire people facing their own personal downfalls. Addicts struggling to recover, criminals seeking redemption, people who had made mistakes that seemed unforgivable. A particular phenomenon began to be reported around the world. People in the darkest moments of their lives began experiencing visits from an angelic presence that didn't judge them, but rather comforted and guided them toward redemption. These visits, documented in thousands of testimonies, always followed the same pattern: an angel with wings that shone with pearly light, with a face marked by suffering but radiating infinite compassion. The deepest truth about Sariel, the one that had remained hidden even during her heavenly judgment, was revealed millennia after her redemption. The God command had not actually disobeyed divine orders during the destruction of Kadesh. It had fulfilled a much deeper mission, one that had been planned since the beginning of time. The Almighty, in his infinite wisdom, had foreseen that creation would need an example of redemption more powerful than any theoretical teaching. It needed a being who had experienced the fall and found the way back, someone who could serve as a bridge between heavenly perfection and earthly suffering. Sariel had been chosen for this mission since his creation. His capacity for compassion, his connection to humanity, his eventual disobedience, all had been part of a larger divine plan. He had been called to fall so he could show that redemption was possible, to suffer so he could understand human pain, to serve in silence to demonstrate that humility was the path to true holiness. This final revelation did not diminish the grandeur of Sariel's transformation. On the contrary, it magnified it. He had been chosen for the most difficult mission possible, to experience divine separation in order to show the way back. His free will had been completely respected. He could have chosen the path of bitterness and revenge like other fallen angels. Instead, he had chosen love. Sariel's story forever changed the heavenly and earthly understanding of the nature of forgiveness, redemption, and second chances. Her palace in the fifth heaven became the most important pilgrimage destination for souls seeking transformation. Every day, millions of prayers addressed to Sariel arrive from earth, from mothers who have lost children, from people struggling with guilt, from individuals seeking second chances. And each prayer is answered, not with spectacular miracles, but with the silent presence of someone who understands the pain because they have experienced it, who knows the path to redemption because they have walked it. The other fallen angels disciples, inspired by Sariel's example, began their own journeys of redemption. Although none had yet achieved complete forgiveness, her story demonstrated that the path existed, that the door of divine mercy never completely closed. On earth, Sariel's story became the most powerful symbol of hope for humanity. Her message is simple, yet revolutionary. No matter how deep your fall, how dark your past, how unforgivable your mistakes seem, redemption is always possible for those willing to transform their pain into love and their suffering into service. Sariel's story continues to be written every day, in every act of compassion, in every moment of forgiveness, in every second chance given and received, because he demonstrated that true glory lies not in untouched perfection, but in the ability to rise after a fall, to love after pain, to serve after suffering. His name, which means God's command, now has a new meaning. He is not simply one who obeys divine orders, but one who demonstrates that the supreme commandment of love can transform even the deepest falls into elevations toward holiness. End. This story, based on ancient texts discovered in lost monasteries, reminds us that redemption is always possible, that true love can transform any situation, and that it's never too late to start over. Sariel's story continues to inspire millions of people around the world, demonstrating that second chances are not only possible, but are the purest expression of divine mercy.